Hello, welcome back to Crushing Sounds. My name is Chris, and today, to start the end of the year roundup, I'm looking back at the albums I planned to review but never did. So for those of you who were not previously aware, I try to keep semi-up-to-date with the albums that I talk about on this channel. Should I take too long in making a review or something takes my attention away from what I'm reviewing, I'll be forced to move on for whatever reason. So I thought before the end of the year, I'd look back at 3 of my uncompleted reviews, as in pen was put to paper but the review never manifested. I thought I'd give them the full treatment they deserve in one big video. I've no current idea how long this is going to take. We'll find out. So the albums I'll be covering in today's video are Code Orange, Underneath, 6 Feet Under, Nightmares of the Decomposed, and Imperial Triumphant, Alphaville. So, without further delay, let's start the first review. So for those of you who have blissfully forgotten, March of this year was somewhat turbulent, to say the least. Here in the UK, for example, we went into national lockdown mere days after this album dropped. There was no way that I was going to be able to review this album at the time when it came out. This isn't a rant about my low output, I'm just setting the context for what we're talking about here. So, anyway, Code Orange. You know who they are, one would hope. One of the rising stars of the hardcore metal movement. Formed in 2008, Code Orange have been slowly rising the ranks of the scene until the release of their third album, Forever, in 2017. From here, the band exploded with vast critical acclaim and recognition. I put it in my top 5 albums that year when it came out, and my brother Mike, co-host of the channel, he put it as his #1 favourite album of 2017, so that's quite an album you've got to follow up on, to say the least. Obviously that's very high praise. We really liked the previous album, so I was optimistic for their follow-up. So this album was a massive success, despite the context in which it came out. Critical response was as good, if not better, than the previous album, and I remember there was a lot of praise flying around for Code Orange at the time. Add to that a very well publicised live show that they did. The band have done their best to have a very good year off the back of this album, despite the difficulties, which I have a lot of respect for. So Code Orange's sound was well established on Forever. They're very harsh, unrelenting, rather confrontational in a good way. This album takes that foundation and builds upon it further. For starters, this album is just shy of 50 minutes compared to Forever's 35 minutes. This album, therefore, is also harsh, unrelenting, confrontational, but it's bigger in pretty much every sense. I've not been the biggest advocate for hardcore music in the past. I often find a lot of that subgenre rather derivative and samey. Often the brutal riffing feels like an affectation rather than actual creativity. I've been trying to come round to the genre lately, but regardless of my opinion on that genre, Code Orange have always been a reminder to me that there are not just good bands in that subgenre, but there are great bands as well, and that is continually reinforced because Underneath is brilliant and absolutely better than Forever. If you liked the previous album, Forever, and I very much did, everything good about that album is done here, but done even better, in my opinion. It plays like a horror movie in your own head. It kicks off and doesn't let you go throughout the whole thing, so you cannot relax. Even in the somber moments, you're constantly on edge, waiting for the next big punch in the face to come. You'll know this if you've seen a few of my videos. I have rarely been impressed by noise-based intros, no matter the genre. I find them very lame, very overdone, and very pointless at this point. Code Orange have done it. This album starts with so much dread, and it's one of the most intimidating intros to an album I've ever heard, at least heard in a very long time. This band have a way of using noise to such a powerful effect. If there's one thing that elevates horror settings for me, it's the use of sound, and this band do very much the same thing. The tension and release is incredible, and they really know how to use sound to do that. To have a noise intro, to then lead it straight into a drop would have been too obvious, of course, so Swallow the Rabbit Hole, which is the true intro, builds up again with the piano part, and then a choking guitar build up into the real meat. It's like bracing yourself to be hit by a train you can't see coming, and I of course mean that in the best way possible, really. Much like Forever on the previous album, Swallow the Rabbit Whole is a great opener that boots off the album in such a powerful and strong way. I'm big on songs that properly and honestly set up the album that is to come, and this album definitely has that. However, if you're someone who doesn't like sudden stop effects in hardcore, this song has that, and it is by no means the only time it's done on the album. So if that put you off forever for doing that, this album will have that same sticking point here for you again, so be aware of that. The second track, called In Fear, continues the uncomfortable insanity and ends with one of those cut-off, distorted screams that horror fans are sure to recognise and enjoy. The riffing takes on a more frenetic tone on You and You Alone, which of course I'm all for, and the track Who I Am is the first proper demonstration of the brilliant vocals from Reba Meyers, I hope that's how you pronounce your name. I'll say now, she steals this album for me. She was present on the previous album for sure. Bleeding in the Blur was brilliant, yet she feels even more present here. Her vocals are perfect for this kind of thing. They're quite gritty, clean vocals that always grab my attention whenever they come in. It's for this reason alone that Sulphur Surrounding is my favourite track on the album. That chorus is so fucking good, I love it. The Easy Way does stand out on the album, but depending on what you want from this band, that could either be a good or a bad thing. It's probably the most, I don't want to say digestible song, I would say it's definitely the most catchy. In my opinion, it's got a pretty strong vocal hook carrying the song throughout, but it might be too clean for some fans to really get behind. I think it's cool and gives something a bit different without feeling too disparate from everything that came before it. Still, if that is a sticking point for you, the rest of the album brings the heaviness and then some. Last One's Left is a big Nails vibe. You know, the kind of heavy that makes you want to punch yourself in the face, that kind of thing. Autumn and Carbine, more Reba brilliance, and a damn good guitar solo as well on that one. I stated back when Forever was announced that Code Orange were the redemption for hardcore metal. I've since grown to realise that that statement might be a little bit unfair to other bands in the genre, as if Code Orange are the only good thing going for hardcore music. I still am a little bit indifferent and unimpressed by the majority of what I hear from that scene, but hell, I often get faced with people who can't stand genres I love, like prog metal and power metal, so I will concede that if a band like Code Orange exists, then truly hardcore does have merit, because again, this album is fantastic. It feels like a follow-up to the last album, but not by simply continuing it and doing it again. Instead, they grew upon it. It's darker, it's heavier, it's longer, and has even more lasting impact. I didn't know how they'd be able to improve on Forever, but Code Orange have managed it in what feels like an effortlessly flawless album. Underneath is simply brilliant. So the next album I intended to review is Nightmares of the Decomposed by 6 Feet Under. 6 Feet Under are, of course, a major player in the death metal scene, and fronted by Chris Barnes. He was the original vocalist of the legendary Cannibal Corpse, whom he departed from in 1996 when he made 6 Feet Under his main priority. Sorry if I'm spouting stuff that you mega fans know like the back of your hand. I'm just bringing everyone up to speed. That's just what I do. So my introduction to 6 Feet Under way back when was not the best start. It was entertaining in a way, but probably not in the right way. I knew that Chris Barnes was maybe a great guttural vocalist based on early Cannibal Corpse. I mean, it's him on the song Hammer Smash Face, for crying out loud. But the first thing I heard from 6 Feet Under was their cover of The Evil That Men Do by Iron Maiden, which was bad. 6 Feet Under are kind of infamous for their covers. They love doing covers, which is fair enough. I have no problem with band wanting to do covers. I'm not one of those snobs who thinks that covers are irrelevant or anything. I enjoy a cover from every now and then. But the 6 Feet Under covers are truly terrible. Have you ever wanted to hear a cover of TNT by AC/DC, with the only difference being raspy guttural vocals played over the rock riffs played completely straight? If you have, check it out. It's pretty funny, but when it's not funny, it's just sad. But anyway. So I never really went into the actual music because I was not interested. However, with the new album that came out this year, I thought when better to finally give this band a try. However, I wanted to get a sense of what 6 Feet Under were like before hearing the new album, just so I could hear what the band are about. So I listened to one of their albums ahead of this new one. However, Nightmares of the Decomposed is the band's 13th album, so I was a bit overwhelmed with where to start. So I looked online and people said their third album, Maximum Violence, was a great album, so I checked it out ahead of time and I liked it quite a bit. His vocals were already a far cry from when he was in Cannibal Corpse, but I really liked the riffing. It was groove-oriented death metal, and it was pretty damn cool. So 6 Feet Under make good music after all. The mystery is solved. Sorry, I don't mean to be a dick there, but you know. So, at long last, here we are with Nightmares of the Decomposed, the 13th album by 6 Feet Under. This album is all over the place in terms of quality. I can't decide which way I ultimately lean on the whole thing. There are moments I like, and parts that are dreadful. It starts out with so much promise as well. The opening track, Amputator, is good. It has some really good heavy death metal riffing, and the extended guitar solo is really cool as well. But the one major problem with this album, it's unfortunately Chris Barnes on the vocals. I am sure, before any 6 Feet Under fans come charging in to defend him, that his voice has just naturally changed over time. It's not 1992 anymore, and the long-term damages of doing these kind of vocals were likely not completely known at the time. His voice has certainly deteriorated in quality over the years, but they are so weak, and they don't provide any impact on their own. Now, to be fair, when the instrumentation is going full blast, the vocals aren't as distracting once you're used to them. Sure, when he comes in for the first time on the album, it's a little bit jarring, but once you settle into it, it's not too painful within the context of everything else going on. However, the end of the opening track is the first instance where I don't know what he was thinking. We got our first taste of the really high-pitched squealing from Chris, and it is really, really bad. It's so far off the mark, I honestly can't believe that no one in the creation of this album said, that's not that good, can we not do that? Maybe it's deliberately bad in the true cult kind of way, or maybe Chris Barnes had sole creative control and thought it was great, I don't know, but it's terrible, and it's not isolated to this song as well. There are also numerous parts where the instrumentation drop out for the vocals to bark out a line or two. This, of course, is nothing new for the genre. It's normally a good way to signal a heavy drop or to link certain sections together. However, when the vocals lack any kind of power, it doesn't work. The second track, Zodiac, is a perfect example of this. Many times during the song, it all drops out for Chris Barnes to shout, "Pick up the pieces of my frustration." I can't do it justice, of course, but it's really, really bad. At first, it's mildly amusing, but it utterly destroys the pace of the song. But the two absolute worst tracks on the album are The Noose and Blood of the Zombie. Blood of the Zombie is the guitars at their absolute worst, with one of the most uninspired riffs I've heard all year, and it repeats throughout the entire song. It would almost be better if the tempo was brought up a little bit, but as it is, it's so bland. The Noose might be the worst song I've heard this year. I haven't delved too much into music I disliked, so that might be a little bit extreme to say, but this song is terrible. A repeated riff that again is not very good. The structure is exactly the same throughout the entire song, and I'm serious, if you've heard once you've heard half the song, you've heard the entire thing. It doesn't change. But the vocals are especially dreadful on this one. Many times during the song, Barnes comes in when the instruments drop out, and we get each time an attempt at the high screaming. It's just bad across the board. Potentially funny for the first minute, but a drag to listen to the whole thing is really painful. To be fair, there are some more positive moments in the album. If you ignore the vocal performance, if you're able to do that, Dead Girls Don't Scream, it's pretty crushing, as is Drink Blood Get High. Um, in fact, the second half of the album in general almost feels completely different, with how the quality shifts upwards quite a bit. Good way to end, I guess, but doesn't excuse what you have to get through to get to that point. But those two dreadful songs aside, the instrumentation has its merits and has its good moments here and there. But every time those vocals come flying in, it takes all of that away. I don't want to have to put Barnes down so much because he probably would love nothing more than to sound as he did 20 years ago, and he probably works damn hard. But when it distracts from everything else, it's just unforgivable. At least scrap the high pitched noises, please. Just don't. But again, some songs are easier to handle, but when there is an immeasurable amount of far superior death metal vocalists out there who could have carried this album, it just makes you want to turn it off and go listen to a different death metal album, which, that kind of says it all. Man, I've wanted to talk about this one for a while. Imperial Triumphant are an American metal band from New York, formed in 2005, and this is their fourth studio album titled Alphaville. And Alphaville is their fourth album, which dropped July of this year. So, yeah, this was peak lockdown here in the UK when this came out, but I did want to get to this album, it just kept getting pushed back. Nevertheless, here we are. Describing Imperial Triumphant's sound is one of those really, really difficult ones. I've heard many different genre titles used to describe this band. Avant-garde metal, extreme metal, technical death metal, black metal, symphonic black metal, jazz metal. I'm not making that last one up. Metal Hammer, ahead of the album's release, showcased the band by calling them a mixture of jazz and black metal. What's weirder is I can see where they're coming from. So my first introduction to the band was that very Metal Hammer article. I, for the life of me, can't remember what song was featured on it. It might have been Rotted Futures. I can't say for certain. But I do remember liking it, though. I remember, though, the comments on the article were very split. People either loved it or thought it was dire. That doesn't surprise me, as normally that split attitude is common with black metal and its various offshoots, and also because social media comment sections are generally bullshit. Except my comments, you've all been lovely so far. So I was immediately on board when I first heard Imperial Triumphant, so of course I was interested to hear the upcoming album, Alphaville. This is one of those reviews where I'm struggling a little bit, because normally I would talk about the album and my feelings, and whether I liked it or not. It would all become apparent as I talk about the album. However, there are occasionally those reviews, like the Oceans of Slumber review, where I feel I can't help but make my thoughts clear right out of the gate. That is certainly the case here. This album is amazing. I haven't had an album grab me in this way in a very, very, very long time. Even way back when I heard it in July, and when I still hear it now, it's stunning. Absolutely stunning. Alphaville is exceptionally dark in tone, even for a metal album. It's chaotic, it's potentially scary at times, but it's so arresting. It grabbed me from the word go, and didn't let me off for the entire time. I didn't stop to make notes ever. I was just absorbed in the whole thing. I'll try now to explain what this thing is. A lot of the marketing and journalism features honed in on the idea that this is jazz meets black metal. Hearing that statement for the first time, you'll probably have a number of different interpretations as to what that's supposed to sound like, and you'll either be on board or you won't. Zachary Ezrin, I'm probably ruining your name there, sorry, but the guitarist and vocalist of Imperial Triumphant said in an interview with Dave Everly of Metal Hammer in August of this year, "We are not a jazz band by any means. We do play jazz, the rhythm section of my band have done for 15 to 20 years, but we are all metalheads." I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. I'll leave a link in the description below to the article, and I recommend you read it. It's really, really interesting. To me, the way I would describe the sound of this album is its brutal black metal sounds, verging on noise at times, but incorporating the crazy rhythms and timings of the New York jazz kind of sound. I know next to nothing about the intricacies of jazz music. I have been to a jazz night and it was a lot of fun, and some of the talent on display in that genre is just next level, but I can't say how much of the East Coast jazz sound is in Alphaville, but it would seem it's prominent to a point, just with how many people have brought it up in the past and how the band acknowledge it to varying degrees. That being said, if the idea of jazz being in metal is absurd to you, I would urge you to still give this album a try. It's bizarre and it's weird, but it's meant to be, and hopefully if you see it all the way through to the end, you'll at least understand why I was completely taken by it. Even then, if the idea of jazz is so off-putting to you, there are some traditional instruments occasionally used to add some depth, but it is a metal record through and through. So, shall we get into some tracks now? Yeah, so I know I said in the Code Orange section of this video that I enjoyed how they had an intro track that actually worked for me. However, I still always appreciate when bands don't do that, and thank you very much Imperial Triumphant, because the opening build-up and rising atmosphere is part of the opening track. Thank you, that's how it should be fucking done. But anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So the opening track is Rotting Futures, and I know I've banged on about this many times on this channel, but the opening track should be an honest display of what the album is going to be, and Rotted Futures is definitely that. The central riff that runs through it immediately demonstrates the odd timings and rhythms that I alluded to before. I honestly have a hard time counting the rhythm along with it, or banging my head in time of it, probably be more accurate, but it's not clear. And for me, anyway, that always pulls me right in there. You have to listen to the drums in this that are changing all the time, but they're so tight and so consistent. It begs you to listen in as closely as you can, and that's brilliant. However, this track also showcases the black metal within their sound. From the 4-minute mark, we get the crazy and unpredictable guitar lines and choral backing. I think if you like Behemoth's craziest moments, you'll have a lot to enjoy here. This is also one of those albums where I've had to force myself not to talk about every single track on the album because they are all brilliant. City Swine has moments where it drops down somewhat and we get guitar runs played alongside drums, and it's simply some of the most impressive work I've heard this year. The level of discipline and concentration to play this kind of thing is something I hope is not lost on anyone. But just before the 4-minute mark, we get one of this album's many disgusting, insane drops where it goes all out mental. In this one in particular, there are also smashes of piano keys that don't quite sound right, but in a way that just adds to the chaos intensity of everything that's going on. I think Atomic Age is my favourite song of the year. It's certainly in my top 3 at least. It starts with a crackly, broken speaker sound with a a cappella vocal quartet kind of piece playing. Think Cuphead or Bioshock Infinite for the kind of thing I mean. Just seeing the band on Facebook respond to a comment saying that they did all of this in-house, they created and were the ones doing all of this. It just is so cool that this band just put everything into every facet of what they do, and I love it. But the song is probably the most unnerving of the bunch. The amount of times it brings the intensity right down, only to ratchet back up again, means you can't relax, which is also partially due to how difficult it is to get a handle on the rhythm, making it not easy at all to anticipate what's going to come up next, and which is perfect for this creepy-ass tone that they're going for. But the heavy drop into insanity at around 3 minutes 50 is my favourite on the album. It's so mental, so unsettling, and so unpleasant, and I love it. I've noticed a lot of my favourite moments on these songs are at or around the 4-minute mark, weirdly enough. But I've neglected to mention the vocals so far, not because they haven't been good up till now, just because I didn't find a place to really bring that reference in, but the vocals on Atomic Age are particularly insane. They're some of the most chilling, harsh vocals I've heard. They vary hugely, going from some seriously low guttural stuff to spine-chilling high vocals. I'm not sure how the vocals are split up between the band members, if they are at all split up, but they're all done to a fantastic standard. And right when you think the song has let you go, you get a strange electronic noise, followed by a robotic bellowing of Atomic Age, and the song proceeds to beat you over the head some more before moving on. And I shall move on, because I risk talking about this masterpiece of a song all day if I don't. Transmission to Mercury has a great intro, just piano and a brass instrument. It's beautifully haunting, but of course the song then kicks you up the arse and boots off into black metal style riffing. What's not to love? I'll jump to the closing track because this has gone on too long. The Greater Good is probably the most intrinsically heavy track on the album. It starts with a thudding low guitar chugging, which is brought back at various points in the track and it sounds massive. However, guess what time? 4 minute again. 4 minute mark again. What the hell is up with that? Anyway, at the 4 minute mark, the insanity is turned up to 11 with mental guitars and drums, high and chilling harsh vocals, which carries us into a spaced out instrumentation that slowly and awkwardly pitch shifts before fading into silence. There was a sort of stunned silence when I first finished my time with this album. I don't mean this to sound too dramatised and over the top, but I felt a little bit numb after listening to Alphaville for the first time. I almost couldn't wrap my head around what I just heard. The band have stated many times that their creative intention was to provide a musical representation of the chaos and noise of the city, specifically New York. I can't remember the last time I heard an album and went, yeah, I see exactly where you're coming from. Alphaville is not an easy listen. It begs you to be fully engaged in it. You will not get nearly enough out of this if you just stick it on in the background. And it also needs to be heard multiple times to comprehend everything that's great about it. If that's too intense, or you don't enjoy listening to music in that way, then that's fine, but this album isn't for you. I said it earlier, and it bears repeating. I've not been this engaged with an album like this in a very, very long time, and I had no problems listening to it repeatedly to get everything out of it. If you want to listen to something challenging, intense, dark, and something that might make you genuinely feel something, then listen to Alphaville. It's not for everyone, I'm sure, but for me, it's a masterpiece. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this triple album review. It took me a while to get this put together, as I'm sure you can imagine, but I'm glad I can end the year putting these projects to bed, making them fully completed. I have a special video coming up next, and after that, I will get to work on Crushing Sound's Albums of the Year video. You can likely guess at least one of those albums based on this video here, but, you know, there'll be more to discuss, I promise. Over the next week, have a very good Christmas, or at least the best that can be given under the circumstances. Please stay safe out there. And for those of you in England, don't abuse the laxed restrictions. Be sensible, be safe, so that we can get this crazy, horrific problem out of the way as soon as possible in 2021. Thanks again for watching Heavy Metal.